Every time we go live, you will be a part of the conversation. And also, if you're watching us, regardless of whether you're on, YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, whatever, just get in the chats and just say hello because we would like to personally address you by name because that's what we do in this community because we don't believe we do that enough. So that being said, Michelle Ray, good to see you. Crystal Everett, welcome. Let me see who else we have. Lisa Keys, good to see you. Nick D, welcome to the show. Miss Verlene McCoy, always good to see you. Miss Bernadette Simmons, good to see you. Welcome to the show. Um, and again, anybody else, by all means, just get in the chat and let us know that you're here. That said, that kind of takes us into the conversation that we're going to get after this week because we're talking about mastering family dynamics in military life. So, gentlemen, without any objections, we're going to get this party started. Are you or someone that you know feeling the strain of juggling the home front alone while your partner is deployed? Are you someone that you know is still trying to recover from the effects of a deployment? If so, you're not alone. Military families face unique challenges from managing emotional cycles of deployments, field training exercises, and separations of the like to navigating the dual roles of parenting and career for non deployed spouses. In this discussion, we'll explore the profound impacts on children and teens and the vital support systems and resources available to help families thrive during this time. Join us as we dive deep into the understanding of these issues and discover effective strategies to support resilience and stability in military family life. So, I want to kind of start off because on this particular conversation, we got a panel full of veterans, nothing but old, crusty veteran, gray bearded dudes that got DD. Okay, my bad. DD 214s and all, except for that dude beside me. He's still working on his, but that's all right. We still love you, bro. I want to know if you guys would be so, if you would just humor me for a second, like what made you join the military? I'm just curious. What made you do it?
Okay. For me, I was shoot. I was one of those kids that didn't have any. Uh, I was trying to stay out of trouble. I was in the streets, and I had two kids, and I got shot. Then I had a near-death experience, and I kept going, having to go back and forth to court, and the same people were seeing me, and I knew I wanted better. And when I looked at where my children were being raised and everything, I had to do something else because I said somebody got to raise these kids, and it sounds cliche, I think, because I said somebody got to raise these kids, and I don't want it to be somebody else because I was going to either end up dead or in jail. So I made a choice, and plus I knew I needed some type of discipline because growing up in a household without a father, it was a little, strain when it came to actual man learning manhood. I knew how to try to bully my way through or do things like that, but I knew I needed some type of structure. So I raised my hand.
Man, I go next because my story is pretty corny, right? Once I don't remember what war movie we was watching. I was a little kid, and I just remember my father getting irritated. He's like, "This is not realistic," and I'm like, "How would you know? You raising me in the Bronx, you know?" And then I remember him saying, he when I was in Vietnam, this is what I was like, and that stuck in my head for the rest of my childhood, even when my mom, my pop split and everything, blah blah blah. And so as I was coming up, regardless of sports or whatever stuff, I always did like some type of cadet corps and stuff like that, so that I can go back home, go back to my father house and, hey dad, look what I learned, and I learned this about the military. I learned this something because I felt like that was a connection piece. That was something to talk about with my father. And for a while he wasn't interested because I don't think he wanted me involved in stuff like that until I actually joined the military. Got through basic training, and we had something to talk about every time I went home. So it was that, especially when I deployed. He really wanted to talk to me and how are you doing, stuff like that. So That's really what my drive was, to one day be a soldier. Right, as a kid, I want to be a fireman, police officer. One day be a soldier. But when it came time to put boots to feet, I had sold everybody this dream that I was gonna make it out the hood and join the military, and I I just I don't know. I was like, yeah, I can't go back to the hood now. They, so I had to do the do, and I do solemnly swear. 20 years later.
It's funny how both of you mentioned something about your father. I'm gonna throw mine in there a little bit as well. I was running away from any and everything. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Um, so it was like, seemed like everybody that I saw that was older than me, that had graduated and stuff, they were still around, not really doing anything. And I was like, man, I really don't want to be like them. And then when it comes to my father was a user at the time, so he was kind of out of the picture. We kind of got split the home up a little bit when I was in ninth grade, so he wasn't around for those high school years. So it was kind of like, man, I went to college for a semester, I got kicked out of that. Then it was just like, man, it ain't nothing to do around here. So I was just like, I needed to get away from this situation and go do something. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So the military was the fastest and cheapest way to get out of my hometown and away from everything that was going on. So that's in a nutshell why I joined, with no GI Bill money or none of that stuff. But
Again, the consistency of these stories, I think is rather interesting. Because I thought, my dad did 20, I don't know, 24, 25, whatever. Um, and at the end of his career, he grew to not like it. I mean, like really not like it. Um, and it got to the point to where I think it was almost to where I can go as far as saying he hated it. And I recall specifically, he's like, whatever you do, don't join the military. And y'all know me, man. I was a knucklehead back then, man. If a person tell me not to do something, I'm gonna do it. And I'm not saying that was the reason why I did it. I'm saying eventually that was the decision that I made because, like Godfrey, I decided to do the college thing at first. Yeah, me and college, we kind of had a bad relationship when I was like 18 years old. So yeah, it wasn't. It just didn't work out well for me. Not because I got kicked out. I just didn't want to do it anymore. It was like so I was like, okay, I need to make a decision about where I'm going with my life because I had no structure, I had no person, I had nobody that was giving me any type of guidance. And so, what was the get out of jail free card? Military. And so that's what I ended up doing. And yeah, I would tell you that even with my first 3 years, I was just like going through the motions. And so I had a break in service. I had a year break. And during that time, I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, worked retail management at Foot Action. And then during that time, I realized that I worked more as a civilian than I did when I was a soldier. I may have worked harder as a soldier when we did work, but when I say I worked more, I really worked more. And that was the thing that got me back in the Army back in 1999. That was the second stint. And that's when I decided at that point, this time was going to be for good. This time I was going to make it a career. Um, and so the reason why I wanted to start off with that question, because like I said, everybody has their own reason for joining the military. Everybody had their own purpose. And in most cases, I don't know, like I stated the first time I was in, I had no reason. I had no direction. I didn't even think about retiring at that point. In fact, I had a NCO. He was like, yo, man, he said, you're really good at this, blah, 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 blah. You should do this. I was like, man, I don't even want to be here. Like I was that dude. And it's funny how at the young age of 50, how you can see that same mentality, that same behavior, so forth and so on in the younger generation. And so I think it's okay that we be transparent, especially our generation, to let people know, especially the younger generation know, like we're not too far removed, them and us. Like some of the same behaviors that they display were some of the same behaviors that we displayed as well. And we need to stop telling the story as though when we came out the womb, we had it all figured out. No, you didn't. we will still try to figure it out at least well into our 30s and 40s. So that's one of the reasons why I want to jump start this conversation there. Again, to you guys on the panel and everybody who's in the chats, those who are listening, regardless of whatever platform you're on, thank you for your service. If you served, thank you for your service. If you served with someone who served, because that's a tall task as well. Like if you are a military spouse, that is a lot. And I don't think we collectively give military spouses enough credit. So I want to make sure before we get started that I give credit where credit is due. Also, last but not least, wherever you are, again, hit the like button. We like likes. Hit the like button right now. Just go ahead and do it before we get this party rolling. So, gentlemen, again, before we get started, I want everybody to understand that on this platform, we believe that everybody is entitled to their own perspective. Everybody is a subject matter expert of their own perspective. So that being said, on the Empowering Perspective YouTube channel, we welcome everybody's thoughts. So whatever your thoughts are, put them in the channel. We just ask that we be respectful of everybody's opinion. Okay. So the first category that we're going to dive into is called the challenge of oh, you know what? I'm sorry. Let me change my screen over here. Yes, you were right. So describing military lifestyle. Thank you. I'm not going to tell y'all where I was. I was still on past Saturday. Describing military lifestyle. So the first question I want to ask you guys is, from your experience, can you describe what it's like to be in the military, just from your perspective? And as they're starting to put this together, they're speaking from their own personal experiences, not just something they made up.
For me, I went straight from basic training at AIT. I went overseas. I went to Germany. And going from pretty much to Detroit to Germany as an 18-year-old, it kind of threw me off because all I knew was Detroit. Now I'm free in Germany because you could drink, you could smoke, you could do everything legally. And it's like, whoa. And there wasn't too much guidance because I'm over there by myself. You got your leaders and everything, but they don't necessarily, spend time after work. It's just all you. So I found myself doing the things I knew how to do in Detroit. They sold everything, the same things, traps that you find in the city were over there waiting on me. And it was kind of crazy for me because I knew I wanted to get away from that culture, but that culture was what I knew. So I could find myself in familiar situations doing the same thing. And plus I had, like I told you, I had 2 kids. So I'm sending that whole check home. And then I had to have extra money. So I'm over there hustling and doing all these things because I'm looking at like, okay, I got away and I'm still not learning. I still don't see anything different. That was me as an 18-year-old.
I think, the military, the experience is different. I mean, I think in general, there's some basics. All right, you get up in the morning, everybody go to basic training, then you go to AIT, then after that you go to a unit, you get up in the morning, you do PT, you go to work, you go to lunch at the same time. Those are the basics, But I do want to say, I like where Roland went, where he started once you come into the military, because the military, the experience is different based off of a lot of times the rank that you have and the position that you have, and also the duty station or the job that you have. So it's so many different details that go into everybody's unique experience when it comes to the military. However, there are a lot of similarities, and like Roland, you come in, go to basic training, AIT, you go to a place brand new, and for a lot of people, that is the first time that a lot of us have had freedom and money at the same time. A lot of people join right after high school, and, they used to working at McDonald's, trying to be Calvin or these different places and stuff like this. And then now you go to the military and you got your own room. You know what I mean? You got your own money, you're around girls and you're around homies and different things like that. And then you start getting promoted. And then as you get promoted to E5, it's a little bit different because now you become in a leadership position. So now you're in charge of people a little bit, and you're starting to learn about your leadership style. And then you also are trying to teach some of the younger people in you too. So I'm gonna kind of, stop from, around this area, and then, maybe um, Gaddy or Coach may continue it on or something like that. But I'll just, talk about, kind of sort of, once you make E5 or make a certain rank, you start learning early on in the military about leadership early. So, and I think that's a real good thing, especially for young men and young women as they get older and they start to develop into who they are. I think having that early leadership experience with guidance from senior NCOs is a great thing. Like I said, I'll stop right there, the experience part.
Oh man. Just the lifestyle for me, I would say on active duty, it was repetition, fast pace, and just you have to learn how to prioritize in life. Because you're constantly moving, especially once, I thought TRADOC was a little fast paced. Then I got over to FORCECOM and it was even more fast paced, especially when you get in deployment orders before you come back from deployment.
You're using terms that most people don't know. Can you explain TRADOC and FORCECOM?
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. So training and doctrine command, right? I was stationed in the AIT, which is where you learn your job. I'm not gonna break down the acronym. I explain them. Where you learn your job that you're gonna do for the military. And so it's fast paced there because you always got trainees coming in and out, and so you constantly moving and and you expected to hold the standard to the highest level, especially when it comes to appearance and grooming and things of that nature, because you're around a lot of trainees all the time and they need to see what the Army standard looks like, right? And then you get over to what we call the real Army, right? FORCECOM, and you got a whole bunch of different commands, but I was at Fort Hood, Fort Cavazos now. When I first moved over to 1st Cavalry Division, we were on rapid deployment. So before you came back from Iraq, you had orders to go to Iraq. And so when I'm talking about having to learn how to prioritize, if you have a family, if you got, even if you don't have a family, you got a vehicle, you got to know, you got to find some place to store it, put it in some place where it's climate control. You got to, or drop it off at your mama house so it can be driven for a year, or if you got pets, you got to make arrangements. If you got family, you got to make arrangements. You got to have a family care plan. Who's going to take care of your kids if you and your spouses? And so these things, and I look at things from that perspective as I was about to say 42, as an HR guy for the Army, because a lot of these things are ran through our shop, often ran through our shop. So you see these things. So when I'm thinking about the military, I'm thinking about the responsibility you have to learn as soon as you hit ground. We get soldiers who go off while they're in training, get married on Christmas Exodus, come back and don't know that they should have started BAH or whatever happened, and so you just have to learn how to take care of your life, take care of yourself, and take care of responsibilities immediately, and while moving at a fast pace all the time. So just even without the family, on a personal level, I just think about it's just constant movement, constant mental, your mental toughness being tested on a daily. That's how I view the military experience.
I like it. Before I get started, shout out to a good friend of mine, Stephen Ryan. He just took command as Command Sergeant Major for 62nd Signal Battalion at Fort Cavazos. So congratulations to you, brother. I think for me, as I try to describe this, I just look at from two different perspectives. You got training, and then you got being released, because that's what it felt like. Being in training, like basic training and AIT, Advanced Individual Training, right? Like Gaddy said, AIT is where you go to learn how to do your job. and they don't really teach you how to do your job. They teach you like what the book says in relation to your job. Well, basic training is like constantly. It's like, think about waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you're constantly on the go from the time that you wake up. And 5 o'clock might be a little late. It's been years ago, right? Waking up early in the morning and you're constantly on the go until that evening, even to the point to where how you eat is structured. Everything is structured. When you go to eat, it's on the clock. You don't have time to enjoy your food. Don't even worry about tasting it. Get in, scarf it down, and get out so we can get back to training. So that's literally what it's like constantly. And then you get to the point you graduate. Now, for me, it was good because I was going back to high school. I didn't have to worry about being the threats of being recycled and all that other great stuff because I did split option. So I knew you couldn't keep me. So in my mind, that was working on my behalf. Again, I told y'all I was stubborn. I was a knucklehead, right? So you can threaten all these clowns if you want to, but I'm good because I'm leaving, whether I pass or not, whatever. But the other side to it is that I played football leading up to it. So all of the running and all that great, it was good for me. The physical training stuff was good. It was just the mental games that were actually being played that I kind of had a struggle with. So back then, you'd probably be face to face with the drill sergeant and stuff like that. And that's when you really got good at learning how to articulate what I tend to call adjectives, adverbs, and superlatives, right? You got really good at using those extra colorful words in the midst of communication. And then you went to AIT, a little bit more lenient, right? But still a little bit strict. But after training, you have the Army. And it was like, you got a chance to exhale, but still be where you're supposed to be, dress the way you're supposed to dress, perform the way that you're supposed to perform. And so as long as you stayed out of trouble, everything was good. And I had somebody, an NCO told me a long time ago, he said, listen, man, being in the military is easy. He said, I'm going to tell you how to do it. It's a game. He said, once you understand it's a game, then you'll learn how to play it well. He said, look the part, be the part, act the part. That's it. That's the game itself. And when I started digesting that little bit of advice he gave me, I realized that I was starting to get good at the Army. But I had such a disdain before that. I was like, I'm getting out. My mind was made up back here before I started getting good at it. But then when I got in the second time, I brought that information he gave me forward. And at that point, that's when I put it into practice. And I think then that's when the Army really got easy for me and I really started having fun. So I like the fact that we went down this rabbit hole about what the Army experience was for us. And all of us were Army. So we don't have the Air Force experience. We don't have the Marine Corps experience or the Naval experience, just in case your sons and daughters are considering joining. But I wanted us to share what our experience was like because I don't want them to go into basic training think it's going to be a cakewalk. Now, mind you, I haven't seen basic training for over 30 years. So I can't tell you what it's like today. But I still would not assume that it's a cakewalk. Mr. Martin over there, he probably got some more relevant data.
Here's my more relevant data. I just had two sons join. One joined this past November and one joined in January. And currently my oldest son, he did 9 years and he's in the reserves right now. So currently all three of my sons are serving right now. And from what I've heard from these last two, the military that we had, and I just retired in 17. So I retired 7 years ago. And I was talking to one of the NCOs there. He said, yeah, the military that you guys had is no longer there. Like one of my sons had their phone like twice a week. They got to talk on the phone. Like I got a son right now, and AIT has his phone every day. They don't turn it back in. So, of course, when we went in and we didn't have cell phones. So obviously that's something that's totally different when we just speaking about cell phones. But a lot of the different trainings and different things that was standard across the board with us, like certain crew serve weapons training, certain other different trainings that we did, they have taken out of basic training altogether. So it is a kinder, friendlier, gentler military, and it's a lot of it is due to like one of my sons hardly did PT. They said I don't think they did PT 5 times the entire basic training, and I remember we did PT 7 days a week. So it is definitely different now, the basic training piece. So and this is just from hearing over the horse's mouth over the last couple of months.
I was about to say we did PT 5 times a day. Every time you blink, half right, No,
Sound like you
nah,
said
but
forever. That's what that sound
when
like.
when you talk right, when you talk about the cell phones though, I know in basic training, because I did 2 stints in the trade out. My second time was in the basic training unit. It was a hard transition for them because the payphone, and I don't know about y'all, I know, payphones was new technology when some of y'all went. You said 30 years ago.
I see what you did there. I
New
see what you did.
technology. It wasn't no technology. I came in
The
94, 94 the first time.
Yeah, they still got you beat. They came in at like 90. No, but
91.
oh my bad. That's two. My bad. My bad. My bad. Last one. That's the last one. I'm sorry. Nah, but when we had the pay phones, we used to go get the pay cards, and you had a certain time to use it. And since the pay phones phased out and they're no longer in the barracks, I know in basic training at least, if they have the cell phones locked away, they allow them that time during that time frame, and instead of the cell phone. And to me, I still think slightly. I understand you still get the opportunities to use the phone for that time frame, but where only time I find it problematic is the way we had to use the cell phones. I mean the pay phones. It was still structured, and the way I envision it now, open up the cell phone, it takes a little bit of that structured time and away from basic training. But that's just me.
Yeah. I see somebody, I think of Michelle Ray mentioned that, and I heard you say it, that the payphones were in the hallway or in the barracks. Now, ours was in the bay, downstairs, outside. So that's where you had to use the phone at. And you had 2 minutes from the time
Yep.
to pick up. So that was it.
Yeah, and then you calling somebody, don't answer the phone. You like, man, now you done.
Somebody had a Jody experience.
Get the AT&T card. You you make your call and get off.
That's a whole nother conversation there because them numbers got confiscated. Okay, moving on to the next question here, because I think it's important to understand how you go from, being a soldier, being responsible for yourself, to getting to the point to where you finally attain a family. So you obtain a spouse, and then y'all decide to have children, whatever that looks like. So, what were some of the key challenges that you guys faced by, being a military family, if you don't mind sharing?
I think financial management. I was growing up, I wasn't taught financial management, how to balance a checkbook, how to structure and pay bills and everything like that. So when my family finally did catch up to me, the military, they gonna give you. It's just like when you go to college, they gonna send you credit cards and stuff. Military had their own. They back then it was DPP. They gave me a deferred payment plan. I think it was $2,000, where you can take your card and you can go buy what you want to buy from the PX. And then it was for clothing and sales, where you buy the uniforms and everything. They gave $2,500. So, some of us, I like the way I, look in the uniform. Some people want to be bums. That wasn't me. So I had the newest everything because I thought, if I pay for it, I'm good. But then when that bill comes, on the bottom of it says minimum due. You don't realize when you're paying that minimum due, you're going backwards when it comes to this debt that you owe. And now that's putting a strain on your family. That's bringing arguments to the household, because when you're young and they make things shiny and they put lights on it, you buying it. You're trying to buy the new rims. You're trying to buy the new stereo equipment. Every new CD comes out, you're buying it. And if you have a family, now you have to talk that over with somebody. You got to make sure that both of you guys are on the same plane when it comes to finance, because you still got to eat. And if you live off post, which most of us did, you have to have a vehicle. You have to have insurance. I was one of them. I looked at insurance and say, hey, when they catch me, I pay, because I wasn't getting it. Because insurance back then was almost as much as the car to me. And until I got a ticket and they came on post to get me, I was like, nah, I ain't getting insurance, because I didn't want to pay it. So having the mindset to sit people down and teach them financial management and how to govern their finances was one of those challenges for me.
Can y'all address something? Y'all had to pay for your uniforms in basic.
No, you got those first 4 free. But
Oh, I'm
back
about to
then
say,
with
man,
us,
wow.
remember when me and Dwayne came in, they still had the butterfly collars and stuff. So and then they had those old thick winter joints. Somebody want to wear them in Texas. You
Yeah,
get
because y'all
those
had the all
on, and
y'all had the all green, right?
No, we did not have the old green.
no, we had the
I was just
camouflage.
checking. Just
But
checking. My bad.
yeah, so but then you want to buy, your boots after you've been through basic and AIT, everything gets worn down, and I never want to look worn down, so I would make sure my uniforms looked right.
Yeah, I like it. I think that is one. I was stuck on two different ones, but I'm gonna go with separation. In the military, there can be a lot of separation from going to the field or going out and train for a week to going to being deployed for 18 months. So even as small as 24 hours a day, because one of the things we have is every month, every day, someone is pulling 24-hour duty somewhere. So at some point, your number is going to come up, and you, at the least, you're going to have to spend 24 hours on duty. Now, depending on where you at, your spouse may be able to come if you have one, but just that separation right there. And I'm speaking, since we're talking about the military and family dynamics and stuff like this, I'm assuming that we're talking about spouses and or people with kids or adults who may have kids who are in the military, all the above. But I think just this separation and all the potential things and challenges that people face when they are separated. You go deployed and then you come back and you found out that your wife is pregnant and you hadn't been there, or you find out that so and so is messing around with so and so's husband, or these are just some of the negative things. You find out that someone was back home and they were spending up all of the money while you were deployed. So like I said, these are some of the negative things, because we are talking about the challenges and some of the things that happen on a regular basis when people are in the military. And because it can be very challenging being away from your family for such a long time. In my first marriage, I was married previously, and I had 3 sons. So my ex-wife had to do 2 deployments alone, like by herself with kids, with 3 boys. So you imagine being a single mother trying to raise three boys or just 3 kids and stuff like that. So a lot of their responsibilities that the stay-at-home parent has while the deploying soldier is away, and even for 30 days, you think about that. If you have a spouse back home who's working, and then you say, all right, look, babe, I got to go away in 2 months for 30 days, and y'all got 2 kids, and she's working a job too. So now you have to figure out, how are we going to juggle your job along with all of the duties now, because I'm gone for 30 days. So how do you maintain your job, take the kids to football practice, take them to school, take them to the doctor, what I mean? All the other things that have to be done, so it's very challenging, the separation piece in the military for a lot of families.
I was waiting for you.
Who?
Man, Ro,
Roland went before me.
did he?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he did.
He been throwing those shots so much.
Yeah.
My bad.
He used
My
to
bad.
go
Look. I've been waiting for him to throw backs. I've been over here.
No, I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna tell you what it is. Sergeant Major Fuentes in there talking about the Knicks, so that's why he all glassy eyed right now.
Listen, I know a great non-commissioned officer, senior non-commissioned officer, when I see one. I never met him in person, but I know he got to be the best sergeant major these United States Army ever had to offer. Go Knicks. But anyway, man, this is one of those. This one and the last one is just one of those stories or one of those sections we could stay at forever, because it's like, where do I start when you talk about key challenges? But just to kind of carry over where Unc left off is like, I think the families are underappreciated with what they have to go through, especially from us when we're still active and still in. Because for you, you're looking for the support from the family so you can continue to do good military service. Um, but I from their behalf, it's like, where do I get the support? And anybody who knows better know FRG ain't always what it is, unless your spouse is in that in crowd. But I'll leave that alone. I'm
That's right.
sorry, fam.
Acronym, sir.
My bad. My habit. I still use them. My apologies. What is it?
Family
Family
readiness.
readiness.
It's actually SFRG now, but that's fine.
Right.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like family readiness group or something like that. Normally ran by one of the commander's wives. And it's not always pretty for every spouse, right? So you have that piece, and then you have the piece of us when they like when talked about, how do I take care of this when I go to the field for 30 days, or how do you take care of this when I deploy for a year, 18 months, when you get extended, and well, now 9 months. But the real question is, how do once he or she gets adapted to running the family and keeping things running while you're gone, then we come right back and want to reintegrate ourselves right back into the family. And it's like, no, I'm back. I'm in charge. We're gonna do it my way, the way we did it before I left. It's like, but nobody's used to the way it ran before you left, because I had to run it the way I can run it because you were gone. And so it's unfair not for us to reintegrate ourselves back in, but that word on itself, reintegrate ourselves. I think a lot of it, we come home and we want to get right back into our family, and partially because we miss life at home, and for them it's a shell shock. It's like drill sergeant came home. And how do we readjust to this? And everybody used to talk about the divorce rate in the military. I think it's because a lot of us we did training on everything else. We did a class on everything else, but I don't think we took class on how. I think my last deployment, we did do a reintegration training, or part of it was reintegrating back into family role. Don't come home and beat your kids the first day, but a lot of us weren't really sat down and said, hey, you're about to jump into somebody's life who's been living and taking care of everything without you. Give them time to readjust to your presence. Them, your kids, the dog, everything. So for me, I've always found, when you talk about the families, I find that to be one of the hardest, biggest hurdles that the families have to jump over.
See, I'm a approach this from a different perspective, and I'm not saying that what you're saying is wrong at all, because it's absolutely right. That's one of the first things we got when we came back from a deployment. Don't try to reintegrate yourself too fast. Just kind of ease your way back into it. But in my mind, and notice what I just said, in my mind, nothing changed. The way we ran the house when we were together is the way the house is ran when I'm gone. So reintegration should be a piece of cake. But again, that's just my perspective, and I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong. It depends on who you are. But I think that's kind of like where I would go. One of the biggest challenges that I believe that most military families face is actually going through the struggles of learning how to be married and doing all the things that these brothers just talked about, right? Having to do this, having to do 24-hour duty when my number come up on the roster, having to go do this, go to the field, go on the deployment. We got to go in because we're getting ready to go to the range this week, and sometimes we got to work late, and the motor pool still need to be straightened up, and somebody didn't do their job. So Sergeant Major Fuentes, I'm joking. Sergeant Major Fuentes got everybody in the motor pool at 1700 because he's chewing them out. You know what I'm saying? And listen, to Gadget's point, he is probably one of the best sergeant majors that anybody who's ever known him ever encountered, because he treated you with respect. But then the other side to it, you have some people who in their minds, and I got it, they may have been right, but they didn't necessarily treat you with respect. So now you leaving home, you're angry, you're leaving from work, you're going home angry and frustrated, so forth and so on. And now you're going home, your spouses don't necessarily know how to deal with that, so forth and so on. Yes, sir. I use the acronym.
No, I thought I just heard you say, am I correct, that all Psalm ages should be Knicks fans?
No, I did not say that. But thank you for interrupting me. All right, so moving along and continuing what I was saying. So all of that stuff is what people have to learn to deal with. Oh yeah, by the way, we're still trying to figure this whole marriage thing out. And I don't care who you are, marriage is a journey within itself. So even in the midst of that journey, you're still having to do with the struggles of living a military life, which is not like any other job you've ever had. You know, and you heard most of these brothers say it, you know, some of them worked at McDonald's before joining the military, whatever that looks like. So it is a struggle. It's doable, especially when you have the right leadership models before you that helps you with those things. And so in most cases, and I can't speak for these brothers, I think as I matured in my military career, I became a better, and just being honest, I became a better leader to my soldiers than I actually was a better husband at that particular point in time, because they needed me. And I'm being transparent when I say that. They needed me. I had soldiers that would get in trouble. So I had to go to the MP station on the weekend. I had to go to their houses because of domestic violence, like all of these things. So I think all of those things create problems, especially if you had a MOS where you were the only one in your unit of that particular, that job type, MOS, that job type, military occupation specialty. So you're the only one and you're a senior. That means there's only one of you. And so when they need you, they need that particular specialty, they need you. Your name just didn't show up, but you automatically know that's your name. So that means now you got to go. And oh yeah, by the way, you know, little Johnny over here, his dad come and eat lunch with him every week. I'm not little Johnny's dad. And at the end of the day, I'm not trying to be funny. Little Johnny's dad might be a cook. No shout out, no disrespect to cooks. But I'm just saying they got a particular schedule. They know when they come to work. They know when they get off. You see what I'm saying? I didn't. When I went in, it was back before the sun came up. When I got home, it was when the sun was down. And don't get me wrong, there are some days, right? There are some days where I actually get off, you know, before the school buses start running. But those are, you know, far fewer and in between. So I think that kind of incorporates a lot of the challenges, because you have to be flexible when it comes down to these things. You got to understand where you can insert yourself and where you just have to have a large degree of understanding. And that's why I said it is a struggle for military spouses, but it's also a struggle for soldiers as well, because they do understand that if we had a disagreement this morning, that disagreement's still there. I still got to go to work. But when I come back, we probably going to pick up right where we left off from, if that's, you know, what you did. So yeah, number of different things, man. I thank you guys for your perspective. I thank everybody for their perspective in the chats too, because it's a lot of value that was added. Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you guys. Christian, good to see you, brother. Stephen Kyle, Edgar Fuentes, good to see you. Welcome as always, and always appreciate the value you guys add. Tiffany Denise, good to see you. Welcome. I was not a huge reason. Stop it, man. No, I appreciate that, man. If you don't mind bringing that up, Stephen Kyle, I appreciate you, brother. Can you see it? I got you. And this is just kind of like what that looks like. Like you really do believe in other people. So you really want to kind of like, you understand where you came from. You understand what you had and what you didn't had as a young soldier. So you make up in your mind that you want to be better, right? You want to be better for somebody else because you can see the potential in them, and their potential surpasses anything that you ever were. So it's like you want to be that voice of reason. You want to kind of have conversations talking with, not necessarily talking at. So yeah, absolutely. I greatly appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. So let's kind of move on to the next one. It always chokes me out when he does that. I appreciate him. So understanding the emotional cycle of deployment. This was kind of deep. So first one here is, how can military families prepare for and manage the emotional highs and lows that accompany each phase of the deployment cycle? Now, before we get into it, I want to kind of articulate what the phases of a deployment cycle were as we start talking about the emotions, right? I want to kind of articulate what they look like. because the emotional cycle of deployment is a well-recognized framework that describes the common emotional states experienced by military families throughout the different phases. So phase one is what we call anticipation of deployment. And so this is where you go through all of the train up for it. Like the soldier is sharing all types of information with their spouse. Spouses are being intertwined at that point, hopefully, with SFRG because they're building their cohesion as a team as well. And then the next phase is what we tend to call a detachment and withdrawal. Now, here's the reality of the truth. The detachment is necessary, right? Because you can't, it is very difficult to try to maintain an attachment all the way out the door. You got to kind of like set the conditions for your thoughts. So there is a detachment that takes place, which generally happens right before the deployment itself. And then next you have the deployment that takes place. And then after the deployment, there is an emotional disorganization, which is probably one of the most confusing ones because this stage sees the family grappling with their new reality, right? So now dad is not home, mama's not home. We got to kind of move around as though, I mean, we're not trying to erase them, but it's like the things they used to do, they're not able to do it now. So the kids got to have understanding. Mama or daddy, who's ever the spouse, they have to have understanding, and then so forth and so on. And then there's the next phase, which is recovery and stabilization. And so, what does that really mean? That means that at this phase, the family gradually finds like what we call a new routine, the new norm. But the issue here is that this new norm can't be solid. And so it takes a spouse that understands that continues to talk about that with the kids, and the constant communication has to happen because if not, the new norm becomes a norm itself. And then coming closer to the end of the deployment, you have what is called the anticipation to return. So when they're looking forward to the soldier coming home, they're excited, they're preparing like what reception and integration is going to look like. You know, what are we going to have a party? Are we going to have a celebration? If we're going to invite friends over, what does that look like? Do we want to do any of that, or do we just want to enjoy time with, you know, the soldier, our husband, our spouse per se? Do we just want to enjoy time with them by ourselves for a while first? So all of that stuff happens, and then last is the final stage, which is return and reintegration. Now, I said a lot, gentlemen. So if you don't mind now looking at this question, if you don't mind tackling this, how can military families prepare for and manage the emotional highs and lows that accompany each phase of the deployment cycle?
I think, as I was listening, I was thinking about all the different types of families. And on one hand, you have the husband and the wife with the kids family. On the other hand, you have single soldier Joe, right, who may have a girlfriend back home. You also may have single soldier Joe, and he may be really young, but his parents may be very involved in his life. So his extended family is more so his parents. He's 18, he's 19 years old, he's still pretty young. First time leaving the house. So I'll say that, again, families look totally different, and there are a bunch of different types of families in the home. But I would say, even with all of these families, you got to have some of these hard conversations. Whether you want you, well, you don't have to. And depending on the family, you may or may not have the conversation. But the reality of it is that once soldier gets on the plane, there is no guarantee that soldier's coming back. So are we going to, have some of those have some of those have some of those hard conversations, but depending on the family, you're going to determine which conversations we're actually going to have. Some families may not want to have the no return conversation. You have to talk about control. We have to talk about, hey, there will be certain times I may not be able to call, or certain times I may not be able to have conversation with you. What about depend on where you go, the difference in the time zones, you know what I mean? So just having a bunch of different conversations about how things are going to be different once the family member or once the soldier deploys, and is actually gone. How are we going to manage the bills from right here? Are you going to pick them up back home, or am I going to keep doing them? What things are we going to cut off? I mean, just having a whole bunch of different conversations about all of the different things that can possibly be expected from the deployment. Now, this is not going to ensure that nothing happens, and that it's not going to ensure that things are not going to go wrong. However, at least you're starting with the conversation, and that's, I think, is the baseline for how families can prepare for managing emotional highs and lows that accompany each phase of the deployment cycle.
I think communication is key on all levels, because as a leader, I find myself to be a parent at home, but also I'm a parent at work, because I have NCOs, non-commissioned. I have soldiers under me who I have to manage their time. So managing their time means that I need them to communicate to their families what's going on. And anybody that say, well, we just did this, nothing just happens in the military, especially like training. Everything is training, and everything is planned out over time. So if you communicate that to your soldiers and they communicate it to, you got to ensure they communicate it to their families, because if not, you're going to have a mad wife, mad spouse coming up to you saying, well, he didn't tell me this, that, and the other. And then you got to deal with that when you could have dealt with it on the front end. And when you find yourself in that parent mode, that communication goes a long way, because now planning can be established, because now we got to plan for who's going to get the kids to daycare, who's going to pick them up from school. Do we need you to have, like, I had soldiers where the soldier took the ATM card to the field with them. So now you may be in White Sands, New Mexico, and they're in Texas still at Fort Hood, and now they can't get any money. So now that's a problem and a worry. So the communication can alleviate a lot of worries and problems if it's done right, but that's from the top down, not from the bottom up, because I answer to a leader, and those leaders give me information, and I got to disseminate that same information to the lowest level so that we're all on the same sheet of music. So when somebody says, well, I didn't know, we know who to go to. And that's one of the things, because when preparing for deployments and things of that nature, you gear up to do that. You don't just say, okay, we leaving tomorrow. So knowing what's going on, having a calendar, having soldiers' name in your books. Like we were, like, in 220, we had to have soldiers' family members' birthdays and birthdays, anniversaries, and everything. So we know that, hey, Johnny trying to take off some time today because he has to go get something for his spouse. So, hey, okay, Johnny, it's not a stressor. So we can plan around these things and make sure everyone is taken care of, because if they're worried about home and you kind of control their time, now you have a situation on your hand when you could have just said, okay, let me let Johnny slide out a little early so he can make sure mom at home good.
Man, Roe just got some young soldier in trouble by saying nothing just happens in the Army. So somebody just got in trouble. Oh yeah, this last minute duty I got, my bad. Nah. For me, it's not. It's hard, but not complicated, right? And Roland kind of touched on it, and for me, it's communication, right? At all phases. I think as soon as we find out information that that's shareable, we share it with our spouses, right? Just as far as, hey, we got to get ready and make a plan for what we're going to do in the next 5 months, 6 months. We're about to go to the field. I've been artillery units for a while, so that's like, we're about to do our tables, about to do certifications, right? Then we're going to be going to NTC, and this is what the timeline looks like, Then we're gonna we got to do railhead and some late nights once you start packing up connexes and loading up the railheads, and then this is what it looks like to push out, and it's not easy, right? But I think sometimes on what we can do on for the family sometimes is just having these conversations, often sometimes will ease some of the stress. Not all of it is going to ease some of the stress, and some of it is going to come because of the emotional up and downs of getting prepared for you to deploy or to go or do whatever you're gonna do. But we got to have these conversations often, and then when we deploy, and I think it's easy on both sides. Like around what 2006, when we started getting USOs, they started getting USOs down there. Now you can, go down there and make. I don't know what that one is, but I forgot. That's kind of where we go to. Where they get us all our recreation and stuff. You go to the USO. They have downrange. They in Kuwait they have movie. They got like one of them have a theater in there, a computer lab where you can get on social media to talk to family, games, and all kind of stuff in the USO, and MWR. So these things are available to soldiers now going down range. Obviously, when you first get to a new country and you establishing your presence, you don't have all of that. But it came not too long after in Iraq, Afghanistan. So I think using those opportunities to talk to your family, it helps ease some of that stress. That I'm being told by the boss I got to hush. No, but I think the more we communicate, the easier it gets on the soldier and the family. That's my take on it.
I love it. I love it. So yeah, you put the USO, United Services Organization, and MWR is Military Welfare and Recreation. I'm sorry, Morale, Welfare and Recreation. I think the big piece, like everybody said, is the communication thing, right? Whenever you get information as a soldier, disseminate information. Don't withhold information. There's an old saying that most people tend to do is say knowledge is power. Well, no, let's get out of that, right? Knowledge is connection. So if I know something and I share the something that I know, now you actually feel empowered. So I think if we look at that, that helps. I also think the other side to it is getting them integrated as early as you possibly can. What does that mean? SFRG it can be a phenomenal organization, especially if it's ran correctly, right? SFRG kind of creates that information chain. So now they're sharing information as well, and then you're sharing information with your spouse. So now the consistency of the information from them, the consistency of the information from us, it helps the spouse to recognize that SFRG is a trustworthy organization because it's keeping them informed of what is actually going to happen. The one thing that I've seen over the years, and I tell you this happened with me, is that some SFRG leaders don't necessarily realize that they can't handle spouses like soldiers, right? You cannot go tell a spouse, you will do this, you will do that. I don't care who your husband is. Right. And so that's one of the things. So as long as SFRG doesn't do that, then I think the piece of coming together and working together and being a healthy addition to the organization is awesome. But I really do believe in the integrating part, like having a plan, understanding what that plan looked like. So in my absence, these were the things that I was doing. Like, how are we going to do that with me not being here? How can I help? The internet, I think right now probably does a greater job of kind of like not making the absence feel so absent, because some of the things, like say, for example, Roland gave an example where a soldier went to the field and took the debit card. Well, I mean, today most people pay their bills online. So even in a situation like that, the soldier could have still paid the bills. I don't know why the spouse didn't have her own debit card. That ain't my lane. But the point is that the bills still could get paid. So the internet kind of helps to fill in the gaps of what bad decisions would create. But I really do believe integrating the spouse, having the spouse at the unit. Now, again, if the spouse works, this is going to be a little harder. but having the spouse at the unit, going to the FSRG meeting with the spouse, right? Introducing the spouse to the chain of command so that they can understand the leaders that are in charge and will be making decisions on behalf of, like, those things help to ease some of the stress. There's nothing you can do to take away the stress in its entirety. I'm just being transparent. If we go into the field, that's one thing. If you're going on a deployment, that's a whole nother conversation. So at the end of the day, as long as they feel connected to what you're doing and who you are, and trust me, there's some of us, we kind of live that, we kind of exist in that space. And Gaddy, you mentioned it, to where you can't share everything. Well, just that alone makes people feel uneasy. I'm sorry, it's just one of those things. But they need to know that beforehand, not when you can't share the information. You understand what I'm saying? If you can help them to understand, say, look, because of what I do, this, that, and the third, I can't tell you everything. I need you to understand that. So some things I say may sound cryptic, and I need you to be comfortable in understanding that. So that by itself can present a problem. So thank you for saying that. You guys are awesome. I think at this stage, we can skip that question, that whole section, and jump down to the impact on, because you guys talked about it already. To go jump down to the impact on children and teens, because I think this is key. This is key. This is huge. So I think everybody here has little ones, and some of us not so little anymore, right? How do social disruptions, like changing schools and losing contact with friends, the development of identity and social skills in military children?
I'll start. And I'm speaking from my oldest son. My oldest son's 28 now. Actually, he'll be 29 this month. And he went through basic training. He did, I think, 9 years active, and now he's in the reserves. So he, when I went to visit them last year around Thanksgiving time, he mentioned that he had went, I think he counted up, and he had went to like 13 different schools. So some of my knowledge about this I kind of forgot about, but now that he's older and he can recall, and we can have conversations about how things were from his end while I was gone. So we've had some of those conversations. So some of my answer is based off of conversations that I've had with him, and that's why I kind of set that context in there before I began. But he went to a lot of different schools. All of my sons did. I only had one son of the three who actually went, and this was the baby boy. He's 18, and only one of my sons went to the same high school for all 4 years. So when you're young and you're trying to make friends and you're still learning how to navigate going to school and home life and stuff like that, I think that one of the good things is about the military is that they're around other military kids who are experiencing the same things. You know what I mean? So they're all figuring out these disruptions while they're in school, and losing contact with friends is normal. So in a sense, I think it kind of makes them a little bit more resilient to life in general, because unlike a student who spends their entire life in one school, they only see what goes on in that city. If you're in whatever city, USA, and you're in that same city from kindergarten through 12th grade, you're only going to have, a certain amount of knowledge and information and experience. But when you've been to 13 different, it increases that. But you also, like I said, it makes you a lot more resilient because you go through a lot of things that other kids don't go through, like constant moving around, not just from city to city, state to state, country to city to state to country, back to state again. You know what I mean? And then throw in a couple of marriages that break up or separations and stuff like this, and now you're just adding more things to the to all of that. So I think it does make kids a little bit more resilient. I think it gives them a lot more experience when it comes to life and different things like that. But I also think that there are a lot of negative things that can happen with that too. But I just kind of want to just touch on some of those things, and make sure I leave enough meat on the bone for everybody else.
I think for me, being when the children were in school, in high school, I'm sorry, it was a lot different because now changing high school, they are worried about, oh, my friends are here. My friends, we graduated in 2 years. And I'm looking like, okay. So when it comes to that move for them, they're worried about image. They're worried about status. They're worried about those things or playing sports versus when they were younger. Yeah, they just going you put them in a room and they meeting friends. And I think that was never an issue whether or not they were going to meet new friends. But when they got older, then oh, we got to move. Well, we got to move to, and some of the places the army want to send us, to Kansas. And I'm like, I ain't going to no Kansas. I don't want to go to the bottom of Tennessee, or the top of Tennessee, bottom of Kentucky. So there were places that they wouldn't even want to go, or overseas and whatnot. So that's one of those things where you have to sit down and talk as a family and say, hey, this is what dad got to do. This is what mom has to do because this is our job. And if you can make them a part of it, I think it'll help the transition better than just if you say, hey, this is what we got to do. The army say we going. Because then it's forced on them and they looking at who they can stay with. Whereas when I was growing up, I went to preschool through 12th grade with some of the same people. Whereas they will go to, as Uncle saying, various schools and meet new people here and there, learn new languages and all these other things. So there's a benefit to it, but there's also a part of it that where they lose connection with people that they grow with, and that may be a negative.
How did you so you had to have that conversation because when we made our last like big move, it was in 2010 and we went from Fort Hood to here in North Carolina. My son did ninth grade. Actually, he was in Harker Heights. He went to Harker Heights in ninth grade, played football. And then in 10th grade, we came that summer between his ninth and 10th grade. Like, I ain't really had a conversation. I was like, look, bro, we out. We got to go. You know what I mean? So you had to have the conversation with
Now,
some of yours.
I think I'm like you because I was trained,
Yeah.
do as I say,
Yep.
So and looking back, that's why I'm not gonna teach
Back.
people
Yeah.
that, because looking back, I kind of buffalo my way through things. Hey, this is what we got to do. I don't want to hear it. Shut up and get in the car.
Yeah.
So and that's not the right way because now you have a disgruntled team
Yeah.
and you not trying to understand or even take part in what they're going through or even ease it. You just force them into it, say this is what we got to do because you don't necessarily know how. Now, if you have leaders on your side that can help transitions and so forth, then that may help. But you just out there, I kind of went through my whole career figuring stuff out as it went on.
Yeah.
So,
Because
and
I know they granted that, a lot of times if your child is a senior, a lot of times they'll grant you
extra year.
that 1 year of stabilization. But if you had your child in ninth grade and 10th grade, and then you got to move the 11th grade year or mid season or halfway during the school year, you kind of sometimes you just SOL. But yeah, I would do because I've also seen where people have allowed their child to stay with another family member or a soldier or a friend or something like that while they went off. So I know people have made some different things.
They grant your child 1 year stabilization, not you. You gotta go. What you got?
Man. And so I'm just talking about myself, just to be honest with you. Now, granted, I didn't grow up as a military child, but we moved a lot, right? When my parents split, I was like 6. We went from shelter, found us a tier 2, found us. They got us into an apartment, and we up and left again and moved. And so I could say I probably went to like 6 middle schools, 6 elementary schools, 3 middle schools. But I went to 1 high school. But even then moved around a couple of times in Staten Island. So, and I'm thinking about it from my perspective as a child who always had to just get up and go and move all the time. It made me it made me Uh, a good soldier, I was able to adjust to military life because the pack up and go thing, I was ready. After 3 years of being in one place, I was like, "Oh, where's the orders? I got to go." I got uncomfortable being stable, and I don't think I think that's one of the things we discount and in the mindset of children, that expectation of pack up and move turns into a lifestyle and a mental hurdle you have to get over. Even like, I bought this house 4 years ago. Man, I'll be rolling around like, get up out of this neighborhood, find me another house or something. It's like I'm not trying to get up and move out this house right now, but at the same time, my mind is conditioned to start thinking, all right, what's the next move? Something got to change. I've been at this job too long. I've been at this job 5 years, the longest I've been at any duty station, and it's time. I got to go. And so that's the mindset. But I know, creating a stable environment for my children was an end goal for me. Um, and so I have to, and so now as an adult, I still fight the anxiousness of get up and go do something else, get up and go move somewhere else, get up and go find another place to work, go find something else to do, because being here has become uncomfortable because I've been here too long. And I don't really even know how to describe that mental challenge, but that's something that children and teenagers have to adapt to, and and they walk and they carry that mindset for the rest of their lives. And I know, we ain't do nothing to try to hurt them. You're trying to provide, you're trying to secure, your retirement so you can take care of them eventually. Maybe pass them down your GI Bill, but I think that's why a lot of military children become good soldiers, because they're already used to the pack up and go. But what about the ones that don't go? You know, um, I know a lot of military children. Not saying that they all do bad, but I know a lot of military children that just a lot of them that just don't do well if they're not associated with the military. Because I don't think we've ever identified that. We never put two and two together. Like we separate. Oh, they moved around, but they had a family, but they had to pack up and move every 3 to 5 years. I I can see Roland getting ready to say something petty. So
So I like what Edgar said in the chat. Our perspective is not what our children's perspective was. And Roland, you kind of touched on that. You kind of like you said you buffaloed your way through it. I think given our perspective now, it is more understanding of what their perspective could have potentially have been. But during that time, I got this immovable force, the army, and then I got this family, the one that I'm in charge of. And so this is what I got to do. Hey, this is what we're going to do. And I think just like we talked about how we set the spouse up for success when we get ready to deploy, I think hindsight being 2020 for all of us, we can look back over time and say that we may not have necessarily done the same thing for our children and left it to our spouse to do. Maybe, I don't know. So we could have sat down, we could have talked to them and so forth and so on, but it doesn't really matter how much conversation we have. They're still going to leave their friends. They're still going to leave the reputation they had at the school, all that great stuff. And so there is a degree of, and I don't necessarily want to call it anxiety, but it could be more so of depression, because now I'm being separated from my support, my external support group. And then it's like, now I got to go to this new location. I got to make these connections again with different people. I got to meet these. I got to kind of like build up my reputation again. So it's a lot of that may be going on in the minds of that child. But the only way that we're going to know is if we sit down and have a talk with them and ask, right? So ask those questions. And again, this is speaking from a person who, like Roland, I didn't do that. Hey, we're getting ready to go pack up, right? And that's it. We're going to a new location, get excited, woohoo, and that was it. Why are you looking upset? Come on, pick your head up. We're gonna be all right. You're gonna be good. So a lot of that toxic positivity stuff. It'll be all right. You good. You can make new friends wherever you go. And we don't really think about it. We just do that. And to your point, Gaddy, I think you're right. I think a lot of military children can make great soldiers, but I don't think it's a good reason. Now, you know what I'm saying? I don't think it's a good thing. That's what I'm saying, because we've created this resiliency in them that keeps people at a distance, and because they keep people at a distance, they are conditioned to keep people at a distance for the rest of their lives moving forward until they learn to do differently. And so there's a lot of pros and cons to it. Does it help the child to become more resilient? Absolutely. But then the other side to it, how do they obtain that resiliency? Do they obtain that resiliency by the way of just saying, hey, you know what, moving forward, I'm not getting close to nobody else because I don't want to go through this again. So that's just kind of like my thoughts. And again, it's kind of like in concert with what everybody else said. I think we got time for one last question. Listen, we greatly appreciate everybody here, everybody in the chats. We see the value that you're putting in here, but as you can see, this is a very extensive conversation. And thanks to some of the comments that I'm seeing, that are telling us thank you for having this conversation. I want to make sure that we continue to dive deep into it as we're doing. So one last question I want to get to before we, turn over. I want to kind of get after the support system, right? So what role do community partnerships play in enhancing the support network for military families? Now, we talked about SFRG, but I want to go beyond SFRG. I want to talk about like community partnerships. So now what am I talking about? I'm talking about the external groups outside of the military, the ones that you created, families, friends, whether we're talking associations within the local community. Like what role do they play when it comes down to enhancing the support network for military families?
I don't have a lot, but I'll keep mine short and simple. Y'all, who all deployed? The three of us all. Did y'all rolling? All y'all deployed out of? Did y'all deploy out of Fort Hood though? Do y'all remember the hug lady? Did y'all get a hug from her? You got one too, Gaddy? So all four of us have been. There was a lady at Fort Hood that every time soldiers used to deploy, she would hug every single soldier. They just call it a hug lady. So just right there, I didn't really think too much about it then. When I was deploying, I left the first time in I think 05. I left the second time in 07. So it was a while ago. However, as I got older and I look back on my career, I thought about how important that was, or just how important that was. Something very small like that, just something as simple as a hug, but it's something that all four of us have right here, as a memory that we all can connect right there. So sometimes what community partnerships can do is they can create lasting impressions and memories, and even connection pieces for people who are in the military. That's my 2 cents. Hug lady.
Man, I think we're talking about community partnership. I see a lot. I go back, think about a lot of my battle buddies, and their families and their spouses. Some of the ones that had like the stronger family structure back at home, their spouses, um, they will have family members move down during deployments and stuff like that to help with the children, things like that. Because we talk about the local stuff, but for most of us, unless you marry somebody local, for most of us, that true community that we came up with is in another state or another city. And so I think it's important to keep in mind when it comes to our families, that ability to allow, even if it's their mama, to come stay down there with her to help her with the children or with new baby, because a lot of people deploy with newborns. But it's an effort to ease the load and bring some familiarity to their life while you're gone, because you are their support system and they're yours. And that help us stand together. I think the strongest strongest thing we have when it comes to, and I'm just thinking about, and I know it's the community partnerships, support network for military families, but for me, I just, maybe it was just my generation. They didn't really play a part with us in our families. It was that family support. It was each other's families. As battle buddies, our our spouses became friends. They helped each other out. They connected with each other, and that's how they got through field problems and deployments. Oh, you Gaddy wife needs da 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 da. Somebody's spouse will go drop it off, and and that was just another layer of support. And then that, as the soldier, I felt a lot of ease knowing that everybody was there for everybody.
Well, for me, it's short and sweet. We had joined the church, and you have your churches, you have your sorrows, you have your frat brothers, whatever, who aren't up to no good because everybody don't mean you well. That's why you have to know your circles. But we were heavily involved in the church, and those people that were entrusted at watching our kids while I was here were the same people that was going to come by, make sure everything was okay, and hey, if the grass needed to be cut or whatever, you had those people who had become uh, almost adopted families that we had grown to know and love, who were going to make sure everything was okay and nothing was going to fall short while you were away. Those were the people that enhance my ability to be deployed and not have to worry so much.
I thank you, Garfield. You reminded me of the hug lady, like for real. And I want, if I may, if y'all can humor me, because I just want to real quick. Can you put that up there? Yes. I don't know if you guys can see that, but as you can see, and let me see if I can make this bigger. This is what she did every deployment. Like she would hug every soldier. It was like one of the most, like you're getting ready to go and your mind is fixing. There's this little sweet old lady that's there that she just wants to hug you as you go out. Like that's good. I'm glad you remembered that, bro. Because every time I went out that terminal, she was right there. And that's one of the things that became like a staple. And Roland, you kind of mentioned in the private chat that they named, what'd you say they named that terminal after her?
Yeah, they did. They named the
Okay.
terminal after her. So
Yeah.
she gave out over 500,000 hugs.
That is amazing. So, man, I'm thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up, man, because those things matter. I think it's a lot of times we don't necessarily look at the little things that people do, right? It's the little things that matter. So the person that you know that live down the street that recognizes that your spouse is not going to be there and they come and sit with you, come and see you every day just to check on you, see how you're doing, whatever that looks like. The close associations that you create, the church family, the extended family, the external family, like friends that you create, even like get it to your point, even the friends that you create that are in the FFRG group, but then you guys kind of develop a connection outside. That's, to me, that's a perfect example of that. So it's those things. So those incremental those individual micro adjustments that you make in your life to kind of make time go by, to kind of ease some of the stressors that you're going to deal with in the midst of the soldier being absent. So absolutely. So shout out to the hug lady. We understand that she's going on to glory, but man, her memory will live on forever. So that being said, we greatly appreciate everybody. We greatly appreciate your comments. Again, everybody that's in the chats, we value everything that you said. As you can see, it doesn't matter how old you are, where you're from, whatever the case may be, there's a lot of shared experiences that we can all glean from. And I hope that this show has been valued to somebody who's been listening. And again, share it with other people. But before you do that, before we get to that point, we got our final thoughts.
This conversation to me was fun, but in a nutshell, it's about family, community, support, and understanding, right? Because everything that we're going through, I believe we go through it, whether it's from the military perspective, regular life, whatever you do, we go through it through multiple perspectives. Your perspective, the perspective of your support team, your staff, if you have any, and your children. Um, and it's important that we understand how our decisions and how we move affect everyone that is a part of the journey with us. Not so that we can stop the journey, not so that we can change the journey, but maybe we can affect our interactions with the people that are around us so that it can change maybe a negative outlook or a negative outcome on their behalf and their perspective during the journey. And I think that's the service that we can do for one another, for our family, which is our first ministry. So with that, I just say, love you, bless you.
I'll start off by saying, the topic of tonight's show is called mastering family dynamics in military life. Anytime you're looking at mastery, that involves a high level, right? So, and there are a lot of people who believe that it takes at least 10,000 hours to master something. So imagine intentionally putting 10,000 hours into something. And I say that even with the military family, 10,000 hours still may not get you to mastery. But I think that, with this topic, as we're looking at mastery as a goal to try to achieve. Now we understand that, like I said, mastery takes a lot. Um, but I think that there are so many different dynamics when it comes to the family dynamics that we should focus on, is the balance piece when it comes to mastering the family dynamics. And we also need to be aware that mastery takes time, it takes effort, and it takes as many parties to buy in to the overall vision of the family as possible. And with the military family specifically, it's a lot different than a lot of other different families because um, of the potential ramifications if there is a deployment, if there is a war or something like that. The end goal, I mean, not the end goal, but the ending could be death, and it could mean the separation of your family. So again, to sum up my final thought, mastery takes a lot of effort from everybody's part. It takes a lot of balance. It takes a lot of everything. So good luck to anybody out there who is navigating this mastering family dynamics. And that's my 2 cents.
My grandmother always said, "You either a young fool, old fool, or a damn fool." And at each level, you should be trying to better yourself. And that's how the military structure is. So when you have a family in the military, or even if you don't have a family, you should be trying to find you somebody that can undergird you, that can help teach you to get to that next level. And it's even harder when you do have a family because now you have to worry about yourself as well as multiple people, communicating with multiple people, making sure that you dot all the I's and cross all the T's. So the mastering it, as Uncle was saying, it takes time because I was that person who I was a fool at each level in the military at some point where I didn't do the right thing. So I'm not going to get on, some people say, well, I was the best soldier. No, I knew how to act the part. I knew how to look the part at times. And sometimes I was faking it while I was making it. So when it came to being a parent, it became habitual that I was doing the same thing. So in the family structure, the dynamic within the family and the military, find yourself someone who has a family and who is trying to do the right thing because you may be helping pull one another along so that you can communicate that to your spouse and they can have a ease mind when it comes to the things that you're doing because you're training and you shouldn't have to worry about home as much when you have somebody that you know is on your team. And team players work together, and that's what a family is. They work on the same team. That's what the military was. I don't care where whether you're from Indiana or you from Florida or New York, you all on the same team, and you grow to be family. And that dynamic can be a blessing or it can be a curse. It's all what you put into it.
I don't have any last words for this evening, but I do want to say this. Remember the hug lady. I'm serious. Like that is, I don't care who you are. If you ever experienced her, just thinking about her kind of just puts you at a sense of calm. So remember the hug lady, right? Try to, not that we're idolizing her, anything of that sort, but what can you do for somebody else? You know what I'm saying? How can you help another family go through their struggles, their concerns, their challenges, things of that nature? If you are a senior in the military, how can you help those younger soldiers manage family life? I agree with Edgar. Some people, they're just going to make the bad decisions, but at least you know that you do your part. So again, if there's somebody out there who's struggling with family life, who's trying to figure out this whole family life as well as dealing with military life and managing military life, how you may have to do a little bit more for somebody. You may have to give a little bit more help. But overall, I think it will pay. I think it will pay off. So that being said, listen, we greatly appreciate you guys. We value you every time you decide to come on here and participate with us. And it is our desire to give you the best versions of ourselves every time we come on here. So that being said, next week, same time, same channel, 8 p.m. Friday nights, the Hearts of Men podcast. That being said, allow the best version of yourself to be a blessing to somebody else. And we'll see you next week.